different types of muscles. You have cardiac muscle, which is found where, class? In the heart. Skeletal muscle.
Muscle.
Okay, the skeletal muscle is going to move the skeleton. So we move those are the muscles that we use movement. And smooth muscle. Where's smooth muscle? Digestive tract, like peristaltic movements in the colon. What about for blood vessels? Do we have smooth muscles around blood vessels? If I'm laying down and I jump up real fast, what do my blood vessels do so that the blood doesn't fall out of my head and make me pass out? They contract, they go into vasoconstriction, which makes the hole smaller, which increases the pressure. It's just like if you had a hose, bless you. If you had a hose and you took your thumb and put it over the end of the hose and you made the outlet for the hose smaller, the water would speed up. It would increase the pressure on the hose, right? So you get vasoconstriction when you need to increase your blood pressure. Like so if you were going to run, like if a tiger came in here, we'd go into fight or flight. Our sympathetic nervous system would be stimulated, release adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, acetylcholine, so we could have muscle contraction. Our blood pressure would go up, we get vasodilation of blood flow to our arms and our legs so we could run or we could fight or flight. Okay? So sometimes there's problems with that system when people get addicted to caffeine. If you have 1 cup of coffee or one Diet Coke a day or a couple cups of tea a day, it may not do it. But some people get where they have to have like 5 cups of coffee or 5 diet drinks every day. If they don't, they will get headaches because they'll get vasodilation because caffeine causes vasoconstriction in the brain, which is not good because you actually want good blood flow in the brain. But if you get where you're always getting addicted to having caffeine to keep you awake, when you drink too much of it, you'll get bored. If you don't have it, you'll get headaches. It's a real common cause of tension headaches from addiction to caffeine. So, anyways, let's look at the next slide here. Uh-oh. I think we're on that. Sorry about that. Go back to muscles. Sorry. Okay. So this is showing like the quadratus plantae muscle. I've done lots of dissection of this in computer cadavers. So you're doing dissection. This is the quadratus plantae muscle. It's a muscle at the bottom of your foot. And they're separated by fascia. This is talking about the fascia here. This is the plantar fascia they cut out. That's the plantar fascia. So the plantar fascia is what type of tissue? Is it epithelial? Is it connective? Fascia is connective tissue. Connective tissue. It's not muscle. It's not bone. It's not nerve. It's connective tissue. So you have a big fascia on the foot called the plantar fascia. And if you get like my age and you run too much, a lot of times you'll make that fascia tight and you'll have pain in it. It's called plantar fasciitis. Sometimes people even get palmar fasciitis, but not very often. Mostly just with massage therapists. Okay? So there's different surroundings, different layers surrounding different muscles. Fascia surrounds it. I'm not going to test you on this, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. Lots of big words. But the muscles and layers, there are sarcolemma, which is the muscle fibers in the membrane. Sarcoplasma, which is kind of like cytoplasm, and in the myofibrils. So you'll probably see myofibrils on the test. And the thing that we're going to be concerned about is the actin and myosin fibrils that contract. So the actin and myosin fibrils contract and shorten and slide on each other. That's how your bicep muscle shortens. So the bicep has 2 heads, that's what they call the bicep. The first head comes from, move this over here. The first head comes from the coracoid process of the scapula. That's the long head. And the short head comes from the outer lateral part of the humerus bone. So it has 2 heads. It has on its origin, and then it comes down here and inserts on the radius and the ulna. So when that muscle contracts, it shortens, and the actin myosin fibrils contract and slide each other, it flexes the elbow and it flexes the arm. that does supination of the forearm at the elbow joint because of the direction the muscle fibers run. So you're going to have to know what origin and insertion is. The origin is where it starts, the muscle starts, it's closer to the midline, or what we call proximal. And it goes further away from the body, away from the axial skeleton or the spine, to the appendicular skeleton or the arms or limbs. So it goes out here to, this is the insertion. The origin stays fixed and the insertion moves. So on the bicep, the two long heads, or the origin, they hold still, but the part that moves is the insertion. So it's like that in every single muscle. You have an origin and insertion. So I'm not going to make you learn every single muscle. I had to learn every muscle, the origin, the insertion. We had to learn where it came on the bone. We had to learn the nerve went to it, the artery, and the action. But I'm going to have you learn the major groups of muscles, like the 4 groups of muscles in the front of the leg. What are those called? These 4 muscles and the big muscles in the front of the leg. Quadriceps. The quads, right? So rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and vastus intermedius. Okay, so there's 4 muscles in the front. That's called the quadriceps. There's 3 muscles in the back. Okay, they're called the hamstrings. They're the semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris. So there's 3 muscles in the back. So those 2 groups are in opposition to each other. So the quads extend the knee and extend the hip, and the hamstrings flex the knee and flex the hip. So we call these flexors, the hamstrings are flexors, the quads are extensors, just like the bicep is a flexor and the tricep is an extensor. The tricep has 3 heads, that's why they call it tricep. It's an extensor, this is a flexor, so you'll have to know about flexors and extensors. You're also going to have to know about origins and insertions, and action and things like that. The action is what that muscle does. So the quadriceps are knee extenders and they're knee extenders and hip flexors. And the hamstrings are knee flexors and hip extenders also. Okay? So let me go on to here. So this is showing that what the muscles are made of. They have the coating around them called the sarcolemma, and it shows mitochondria in there, and then the sarcoplasm, and then the myofibril. So the myofibril is where you have the actin and the myosin fibrils. The actin and myosin fibrils are the moving part. Okay, so actin and myosin. Actin are the thin ones, and myosin are the thick ones. Okay. They're different in colors, so there's like a dark band and light bands, thin and thick filaments. And there's a zone that decreases when they contract. So you have the bands sliding on each other. You have the actin and myosin fibrils. When it contracts, they'll slide over each other like that. Okay, so you have muscles, you have bundles of muscles. You have fibers, myofibrils, and myofilaments and then the myofilaments are the actin and myosin. So how does this all work? How does the nervous system control your muscles? So when I want to move my arm like this or flex my bicep, my brain sends the impulse from the brain down the spinal cord, out the C5, C6 nerve root, which becomes a musculocutaneous nerve, which makes it contract. And the way it contracts is the nerve sends, it's not just one neuron from my brain out. There's actually, if I flex my right arm, my left brain sends a signal down my spinal cord, and it crosses over, and then in here, it accesses the C5, C6 nerve root, becomes a musculocutaneous nerve, but there's thousands of neurons. The neurons all come together. You have axons and dendrites. Where the axons and dendrites come together, you have what they call a synaptic cliff. And you need need acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, to carry the message, the chemical transmission of the nerve across the synaptic cliff. This is showing it right here. Here's a neuron, and it shows how it has to cross there. Let me see if there's a better picture. So it's showing a neuron coming to that to make the actin myosin fibrils will contract. So here's the junction. So you need different neurotransmitters like acetylcholine. You also need different electrolytes like calcium and sodium and different things like that. That's like if you run too long, you might get a cramp. Like you play tennis on a really hot day. One time I played tennis in August, and it was down in this valley. It was really hot down there. And I brought like 2 gallons of water, and I didn't bring any salt pills. I didn't bring any electrolytes with me, like Gatorade, or you guys have a 100 plus or whatever. And I drank all that water, but it was so hot that it was 105 that day, which is like 41 degrees here. I actually got low on electrolytes, and I started to cramp up, and I started to overheat, and it was horrible. So you have the actin and myosin fibrils, and you have this thing called tropomyosin that blocks it. And with ATP, you can make it so it'll work so that the actin and myosin fibrils can actually contract and move on each other. That's how that works. So this shows in here, it shows the actin and myosin, and what they'll do is they'll actually approximate and they'll slide on each other. This is the actin, this is the myosin, and it'll slide and it'll shorten. And that's how a muscle contracts on itself. So we have ATP, of course, that's what we use. That's produced by cellular respiration, and that's what that's going to happen in the course of the mitochondria, and that's going to create the energy for the actin and myosin fibrils to contract. Okay, this is just some other stuff. So, what is a threshold stimulus? The threshold stimulus is the amount of neurotransmitter and electrolytes you need to get over that for the muscle to contract. It's either all or none response. It either contract or won't contract. If you want to contract harder, you just get more myofibrils involved. So one myofibril fires. They don't contract like partially enough. They contract 100% or not. But when you want a harder contraction, you'll just use more myofibrils to make it contract. So what is recruitment? So sometimes you use other muscles too when you're working on that. What is muscular hypertrophy? So as you lift weights all the time, your muscles get bigger. You're swinging a hammer every day, you're playing tennis every day, your muscles will get bigger from use. Wolff's Law of Physiology. So, Maureen, what is Wolff's Law of Physiology? Wolff's Law of Physiology. Can you explain that to me?
Oh, like depending on the environment, will like improve some qualities.
That's good. And how does that exactly work? How does that work? How does Wolff's Law of Physiology work? She explained it a little bit, but I want more explanation.
When they are like adapted to the owner, and also like when they stay in that like area for a long time.
Okay, does it?
I thought it was like if you use it a lot, then it gets harder and stronger, and if you don't use it.
Yes. So if you use your muscles, you get hypertrophy. If you don't use it, you get atrophy. So Wolff's Law of Physiology says that if I lift weights every day or run every day, I'm going to make my body stronger and denser and more able to do that. I'll be able to make more ATP. I'll produce more mitochondria in my muscles. If you don't use it, like say remember the movie Gattaca? The guy that supposedly jumped in front of a car and he hurt his spinal column. What happened to his legs?
Yeah.
Okay.
They atrophied.
Wheelchair.
He was in a wheelchair. So his legs got real skinny, right? So that's the opposite. So Wolff's Law of Physiology is like those guys who break bricks with their hands. They don't start off punching a brick. they break their hands. They punch sand, for a couple months, and they start breaking wooden boards. Then they can break concrete bricks without breaking their hand. Because they've made the density of the bones and the skin, everything has gotten denser and thicker. Like those guys who jump 180 yards on the downward ski run, they run down the ramp. They wouldn't do that the first time because they might hurt their knee, break a leg, or something like that. So Wolff's law of physiology is a way that the body adapts to the environment. Excellent. So what is oxygen debt? Not enough oxygen. So if you're running really fast for a long time, you're not going to be able to carry enough oxygen. Like I could run around a track and run 56 seconds on the first quarter mile. The second quarter mile I run 64 seconds. The third one I run 75 seconds. The next one 82 seconds. Because I'm running to oxygen debt. And I no longer get enough oxygen to make the energy to keep me running that fast. Okay? So a threshold stimulus is the minimum strength required to cause a contraction. The motor neuron releases enough acetylcholine to react, and it makes it's an all-or-none response. The fibers that don't partially contract, they either contract or they don't contract. I guess this is the motor unit. Recruitment, you get more and more fibers, so you get a stronger contraction. Muscle tone is the sustained contraction of individual fibers, even when the muscles are at rest. So you have a certain amount of muscle tone. I'm almost 58, and I still have some muscle tone in my muscles, which is good. Some people that don't get to have fun and do sports don't have as much muscle tone when they're 58. So, anyways, these are some good exercises to do, some stretches. We talked about hypertrophy and atrophy, muscle fatigue, muscle cramping, oxygen debt. Okay, origin insertion. Here's the biceps and the triceps. So, Eddie, I know you're busy working on all the assignments that we're doing, but what is an origin? What's the difference between an origin and an insertion? I'm sorry? I can't hear you. What's the origin of the muscle and what's the insertion? What's the difference between those two? Primary and secondary? Well, yeah, the origin, you could call it primary and secondary, but the origin is where the muscle starts. The insertion is where the muscles end. Okay? Hygiene, which one moves? Which one moves? The origin or the insertion? The insertion. Which one, Calvin? Which one is proximal and which one is distal?
The proximal is the origin and the insertion is
the distal. What do I mean by proximal and distal, Helen? What do I even mean by proximal and distal on the body? What does proximal and distal mean? Okay. Proximal means it's closer to the axial skeleton of the spine. Distal means it's further from the spine. So my feet are more distal than my knee. Okay? What is medial and lateral? Lateral means it's to the outside, medial means it's to the center, or medial. Medial is to the center. Lateral is outside. Okay, you can see my anterior superior iliac spine is about 8 centimeters lateral to my umbilicus. So this is my umbilicus, this is my anterior superior iliac spine. This is medial, this is lateral. So, girls, so that's going to be on the test. Medial and lateral. Sorry. Medial and lateral, okay? Proximal and distal. Those are in the test. How many muscles form the front of the leg? Scarlett? How many muscles form these? We call them the quadriceps. So 4 muscles. How many heads does this muscle have? It's called tricep. 3 heads. How many muscles in the back of the leg? There's the hamstrings.
and the quadriceps.
Hamstrings. There's quads have 4, the hamstrings have 3. There's the vastus medialis, the vastus lateralis, and the biceps femoris. And then those are hip extenders and knee flexors. Whereas the quadriceps are knee extenders and hip flexors. They do the opposite. They're antagonists and agonists. They're the opposites. Like the bicep and triceps are in opposition to each other. So you just have to. You can draw it, so using technology to help you draw, so you don't have to spend the whole time staring under a microscope. Cool. And what is this one over here?
This one is this. Areolar tissue.
So that, oh, I messed it up. So that's a connective tissue. So there's dense parts and there's loose parts and there's different elastin fibers in there, the long skinny things. Those are the elastin fibers. And there's loose parts and different parts. This is like a connective tissue that holds things together. It's for support. Okay? And then you have some drawings here. So let's look at your drawings. See what you got here. Okay, so you have some human skeletal muscle. You have some other type of muscle, which I'm not sure what type that is. This is cardiac muscle. And this is some spinal column, some nervous tissue.
Yes.
Okay, so you have little axons and maybe some dendrites and some cell bodies on there. Okay, okay, you're going to color it. And then you're also going to try to get some lung tissue or some adipose tissue, some fat tissue.
Okay. Yep.
That would be good to get. And you have muscle, you have nervous, and you have some connective, and you need some like skin, some epithelial tissue that's like skin, some other type of lining, like lining of the intestinal tract, or something like that. That would be good. If you could get some smooth muscle, that would be also great. You guys are doing awesome. Good job. Excellent. Let's go see how these guys are doing over here. So what are you guys drawing here?
Epithelium tissue.
Epithelial tissue? Where's epithelial tissue found?
Skin, mostly on
Skin.
Nail.
Yeah, nail and lining the digestive tract and things like that. And what else are you drawing besides that? What's this one here? This one?
That's
epithelium.
That's epithelium.
This is epithelial tissue. Okay.
This is pylori.
Okay. What do you? Let me come over here. What do you have here?
This is a mammal mucus tissue.
It's a. Okay, cool. Your article on Gattaca is really good. Did you get my email yet?
No.
Okay, I sent email today, so you didn't get it. But it was a very good job. Okay. Okay, thanks guys, good job. Okay guys, let's see what you're doing over here. You guys looking at the microscope, you're taking pictures?
Can we draw bone tissue?
Can you draw what?
Bone tissue.
Yes, you gotta go get some bone tissue. You got some bone tissue right now?
Oh, this is like
Okay, cool, yeah, so I can see the Haverson canals there. What runs through the Haverson canals,
blood
guys?
vessels, blood vessels.
Blood vessels,
And
nerves,
nerves
and lymphatics. So, what is the difference between a bone healing and a ligament healing?
What? A bone.
What is the difference in time frame from a bone healing, like you say you break your bone, that sounds really bad, versus you twist your ankle playing
I
soccer?
think
Which
bones,
one takes longer?
Bones heal faster.
Why do they heal
Because they
faster?
have a blood supply.
They have direct blood supply. So we call those vascular connective tissues. Now ligaments and tendons and fascia, which is a different type of connective tissue, they are avascular. They do not have direct blood supply. So you just twist your ankle, it could take a year and a half to get totally stable. Or you twist your knee, it could take a year to get healed. So that's the difference. That would be a test question. The difference between vascular connective tissue, which is muscle and bone or vascular, versus avascular, which is like ligaments. So ligaments run from bone to bone, like in the spinal column. Okay? And tendons run from muscle to bone. So a common example of a tendon is, here, let me put this so the camera can see it. The camera can see my leg. Okay, so a common example of a tendon would be the Achilles tendon. So it runs from this big muscle here called the gastrocnemius, the calf muscle, gastrocnemius, and this is the tendon, and it runs to the heel bone called the calcaneus. So that's a tendon. It runs from muscle to bone. Now ligaments run from bone to bone. So in my ankle bone, there's an ankle bone here that sits on top of the heel bone called the talus bone. This is called the calcaneus. There's ligaments that run between them, and there's ligaments that run between the talus and the tibia, the big shin bone. Okay, so there's ligaments. So ligaments run from bone to bone. Tendons run from muscle to bone. That'll be a test question. So where do ligaments run? Bone to bone. Where do tendons run, Jay?
Muscle to bone.
Muscle to bone. Okay, good. So I'm going to make sure you guys know that. So repeat that in your head lots of times, because that's definitely what. Okay, and then we were talking about blood vessels. So different types of blood vessels are called, we were talking about the healing time on different tissues. So bones and muscles are what we call vascular connective tissue, because they have direct, you can see in here on the slides, you can actually see the big hole called the Haverson canals, or Haversian canals, depends on the pronunciation. You can see a hole where the blood vessels run through. So because bones have direct blood supply, you can break a bone completely in half, and as long as you put it back together and stabilize it for 6-8 weeks, it'll completely heal. So it sounds really bad to break a bone, but it's actually better than to tear a ligament. You'll get better faster. And that's the difference between vascular connective tissue, which heals fast, because if it has blood supply, it has nutrients, and it can speed up the healing. If there's not blood supply, if it's avascular like tendons, tendons and ligaments only get blood from the surrounding muscles and bones, and it has to diffuse through all the other tissues to get there. And that's why it can take 1.5 years to do. Okay? Thanks, guys. Thanks for showing all that stuff. Okay?
Do we have to color it?
It would be nice to color it, but you don't have to color it.
Okay, I will.
But take your time, because we have 2 days to do this lab. How's it going? We're making a video recording, too, for my teaching program. Okay, girls, what are you drawing here?
They're drawing.
So, what type of tissue do you think it is? Is that a muscle tissue? Is that a nervous tissue? Is that a connective tissue? Or is that an epithelial tissue? What would be your guess on that? Does anybody know? What does it sound like to you? It's not a muscle tissue, because it's areolar tissue. Okay, so can I look underneath the microscope? Let me see. Okay, now you got to focus it like that. Now can you see those little black lines?
Yeah.
Those are elastin fibers.
Oh, okay.
So this is a connective tissue. It has elastin fibers in it. This is your connective tissue. That's one of the types of the 4 types of tissues you're drawing: muscle tissue, nervous tissue, connective tissue, and epithelial tissue. This one is connective tissue. Okay? Because it has the hypothalamus, or the pituitary gland in the brain, which is protected by its own bones called the sella turcica in the skull. And the hypothalamus sends information from the brain, and it sends different hormones out, enzymes, that are going to affect the targeted organs. It sends out thyroid stimulating hormone to the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland controls your basal metabolic rate. It keeps you warm, it burns fat, it helps your metabolism, okay? So if you have low thyroid function, you'll gain too much weight. If you have high thyroid function, you'll get too skinny, and you'll be hot all the time. You'll get overheat easy. So that's all part of the endocrine system, okay? So eventually we're going to get into studying this guy here, and you're going to study the skeleton. Now, I'm not going to make you learn all the bones in here like I had to learn. You're just going to call this the cranium, which is pretty easy, and you would call this the mandible, the jaw. I'm not going to make you learn the sphenoid bone inside. The sphenoid bone is really cool. It's a butterfly-shaped bone. I was showing some of the boys, I took the skull off. They were looking at it. The sphenoid bone, when it moves, it actually causes the cerebrospinal fluid to pump. The cerebrospinal fluid is the fluid that surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord are surrounded by meninges. And so the brain and the spinal cord are all in an enclosed system. Has anybody ever heard of an infection called meningitis? It's pretty devastating because if you get a bacteria or a virus into the spinal column, it's really hard for doctors to treat it. Almost impossible. Sometimes people die from it. And when that happens, the neck and the back get very tight. And if you just like extend the leg like this, they'll lift their head up because it's causing pain in their neck. So it makes the whole spinal column extremely tight. So you can pull them on their head and they'll raise their legs, or you can move their legs and they'll raise their head. Because all the nerves get inflamed. And it's a very devastating infection. But anyways, in the brain, this is a plastic model, and it looks like this is a solid bone. But in life, really, this is alive, and the bones are moving, and the skull bones actually move. I do craniopathy, and know four types of craniopathy, where we actually adjust the cranium, and I'll push up on the palate to affect the sphenoid bone, because the palatine bone actually touches the sphenoid bone. You can't touch the sphenoid bone because you have to go through the brain, and that would kill the person, of course. So the cerebrospinal fluid is really important because that's how you get circulation to your brain and your spinal cord. Because your brain and your spinal cord have a high demand for glucose and a high demand for oxygen. You have like 30% of all your circulation goes to the brain. Why do you think there's so much energy going to the brain and oxygen necessary for the brain?
You think?
Because it's pretty busy thinking. Not just like right now you're thinking about what I'm saying, you're listening, you're using cerebral cortex. But most of the brain's work is actually not the cerebral cortex. It's for the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, the limbic system. Some of the more primitive parts of the brain that are actually working 24 hours a day without you even being aware of it. Your subconscious mind is running your body. Like right now, I'm walking, I'm standing, I'm moving. This takes more energy than you thinking and doing a hard math problem. Even for you, that seems like a lot of energy. But it takes a lot of energy for your brain just to keep you walking and moving upright also. So 90% of the brain's function is to keep your body alive and maintain homeostasis or balance. Okay? So I went over a lot of stuff pretty quick right now. What did I say that totally confused you guys or blew you away? Because I just went through a lot of stuff really fast. Did you have any questions about what I said? I just said a whole bunch of stuff. Anything that was confusing that I was talking about? What's the cerebrospinal fluid? What's it for? And your spinal column. And it protects the brain and the spinal column, so if you get hit in the head, your brain doesn't slam on the other side of the brain. The brain's surrounded by the meninges. It's like a suspension system that holds the brain in place and protects the brain. And that's where you get all the circulation. Yes, Bruce?
How does the brain send commands to our body?
It sends information from the brain down the spinal column, down the spinal cord, out the spinal nerves to the cells, and then they send information back to the brain. There's more afferent sensory input to the brain than there is input out. So there's a lot of information coming to the brain. Right now you're sitting down and your brain says that your gluteus maximus is touching the ground and it's being pressed on by gravity. You're not even aware of that. Your brain goes, oh yeah, I know that. That's always happening. So there's a lot of things that are happening that we're not even consciously aware of, but our body's aware. Like right now my body's saying that I'm lifting one leg up. It knows that I'm balancing on one leg. And it's making all different muscles work to coordinate that, which is not hard because I'm an adult. But if you're a 1-year-old, you can't stand on one leg like that. And when you get older, you start to get degeneration of the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. When you have that, you start to lose your coordination balance. Guys? Ladies? Yes, there. The sphenoid bone? Okay, the sphenoid bone is a butterfly-shaped bone that's actually behind your eyes and behind your forehead in the center of the brain. Did you know there's a bone in the center of the brain? This is a good test question. Because it's not in your book. It's called the sphenoid bone. It's spelled S-P-H-E-N-O-I-D. PH. Okay? Spheno. And when it moves, it pumps the cerebrospinal fluid. When you breathe, the ribcage moves, the diaphragm moves. When the diaphragm moves and the sphenoid bone moves, the tailbone moves because it's all hooked together with the meninges. And that pumps the cerebrospinal from the brain down the spinal column, all with the tip of the sacrum and back up. Cerebral spinal fluid, CSF. Just write CSF when you do it. Cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, the cerebral spinal fluid is where you get all the circulation to the brain for the glucose and the oxygen and everything the brain needs to survive, and the spinal cord to survive. So it's very important, that whole system. Meningitis is an infection of the meninges. When you get an infection through the blood-brain barrier and it gets into the meninges, that's called meningitis. Usually it's viral, and there's nothing you can do but give people morphine because they're in extreme pain. Ladies, shh. While I'm explaining this stuff, please be quiet because it echoes in here.